The warning bells rang across the Galactic Council station like screams in the darkness. Council members rushed from their chambers, their different alien forms moving with panic they had not felt in 200 years. The massive viewing screens showed something impossible floating in the void before them. A human warship. Chancellor Vexthul pressed his scaled hands against the command console, his reptilian eyes wide with disbelief. The ship on the screen was enormous, larger than anything in the Council fleet. Its black hull seemed to drink the light from nearby stars, and strange symbols covered its surface like scars. "How is this possible?" whispered General Korth, his insect-like mandibles clicking nervously. "We sent them away 2 centuries ago. They should all be dead by now." The ship hung motionless in space, making no aggressive moves but radiating a presence that made every Council member's skin crawl. They had banished humanity to the rim of the galaxy for being too violent, too unpredictable, too dangerous for civilized space. The rim was a place where nothing lived, where the gravity wells and radiation would kill anything that tried to survive there. Yet here they were. "Sir," called the communications officer, her voice shaking. "They're sending a message. Audio only." Vexthul nodded slowly. "Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers was calm, cold, and unmistakably human. It spoke in perfect galactic standard, but there was something different about it, something that made the Council members step back from their consoles. "Greetings, Galactic Council. This is Admiral Keiko Nakamura of the United Earth Ship Retribution. We request permission to dock and address the Council chambers." The silence that followed was deafening. Vexthul looked around at his fellow Council members, seeing his own fear reflected in their alien faces. Finally, he activated the communication system. "Admiral Nakamura, this is Chancellor Vexthul. Your species was exiled from Council space 200 years ago. You have no authority here." A sound came through the speakers that chilled every being in the room. Laughter. Not the wild, chaotic laughter they remembered from humans, but something controlled and patient and terrifying. "Authority?" the human voice asked. "Chancellor, we're not here to ask for authority. We're here to take it." The transmission ended, leaving the Council in stunned silence. Before anyone could speak, their sensors detected something new. Small craft were launching from the human ship, heading directly for their docking bays. "Should we open fire?" General Korth asked, his hand hovering over the weapons controls. Vexthul stared at the approaching shuttles. Something told him that attacking would be the last mistake the Council ever made. No, let them come, but increase security to maximum levels. 30 minutes later, the Council chambers filled with beings they had hoped never to see again. The humans walked through, the doors like they owned the place, their footsteps echoing in the vast room. But these were not the humans the Council remembered. The woman leading them was tall and moved with the fluid grace of a predator. Her hair was silver, but her face looked young, too young for someone who should have been dead for over a century. Her eyes were different too, reflecting light like a cat's in the darkness. Behind her came 50 humans, all wearing the same black uniforms marked with symbols the Council didn't recognize. They moved in perfect coordination, their enhanced bodies clearly visible beneath their clothing. These humans had been changed, improved, made into something new. Admiral Nakamura stopped in the center of the chamber and looked around at the assembled Council members. Her gaze lingered on each alien face, and several Council members found themselves unable to meet her eyes. "Honored Council," she said, her voice carrying easily through the chamber without amplification. "We have returned." "You were exiled," Vexthul managed to say, though his voice cracked with fear. "The Rim territories are uninhabitable. How did you survive?" Nakamura smiled, and the expression was more frightening than any snarl. "We didn't just survive, Chancellor. We learned. We grew. We discovered things you never wanted us to find." She gestured to one of her officers, who activated a holographic display in the center of the chamber. Images appeared in the air, showing star charts, ruined worlds, and things that made several Council members gasp in horror. "The Rim territories aren't empty," Nakamura continued. "They're full of graves. Dozens of species have been exiled there before us. Species who asked too many questions, who refused to follow your rules, who threatened your comfortable little empire." The hologram showed more images now, ruins of cities, skeletons of alien beings, and most damning of all, ships bearing Council markings among the destruction. "You didn't just exile them," Nakamura said, her voice growing colder with each word. "You murdered them. Cut off their supply lines, gave them false navigation data, made sure they would die slowly in the dark where no one would ever find them." "That's not true," General Korth buzzed angrily. We would never— We have the records, Nakamura interrupted. Your own files, recovered from automated stations you thought were destroyed. 200 years we've had to study them, to understand what you really are. The hologram changed again, showing a massive fleet of ships hiding in the darkness beyond the galactic rim. Hundreds of vessels, some clearly human in design, others belonging to species the Council thought extinct. You made one mistake, Nakamura said, walking closer to the Council platform. You assumed we would die like the others, but humans don't die easily, and we don't forgive easily either. She stopped at the base of the platform and looked up at Vexthul. We found the survivors, Chancellor. The Kethari, the Zarthul, the Velnox, and dozens of others. They're all still alive, and they've all been waiting for this day. What do you want? Vexthul whispered. Nakamura's smile returned, cold and patient and full of promise. Justice for every species you murdered, for every life you destroyed, for every truth you buried in the darkness. The lights in the chamber suddenly dimmed, and the Council members realized that the humans' technology was somehow interfacing with their own systems. Security doors locked, communication systems went offline, and emergency protocols failed. To activate. This isn't possible, breathed Science Advisor Zemtar. Our systems are completely isolated. Your systems are primitive, one of Nakamura's officers said. 200 years in the Rim taught us to build better than this. Nakamura activated her own communication device, and her voice was broadcast throughout the station. Citizens of the galaxy. This is Admiral Keiko Nakamura, representing the Rim Alliance. For 2 centuries, your council has lied to you about the fate of exiled species. Today, that ends. She looked back at the council members who were frantically trying to activate their emergency systems. You have one choice, Council. Surrender now and face trial for your crimes, or resist and face the consequences. And if we refuse? Vexthul asked, though he already knew the answer. Nakamura's eyes reflected the chamber lights like a predator's in the night. Then you'll learn why humanity was exiled in the first place, and why that was the biggest mistake you ever made. The human delegation turned and walked toward the exits, their footsteps echoing in the silent chamber. As they reached the doors, Nakamura paused and looked back one final time. We'll give you 24 hours to decide. After that, the real war begins. The doors closed behind them, leaving the Council alone with their fear and the growing realization that their comfortable empire was about to come to a very violent end. The 24 hours passed like a nightmare for the Galactic Council. Emergency sessions ran through the night as desperate council members tried to find a way out of their situation. Some wanted to negotiate, others demanded they fight, and a few quietly began making plans to flee to distant colonies. Chancellor Vexthul had not slept. He stood in his private chambers, staring out at the human warship that hung in space like a dark promise. His advisors had tried everything to contact their allies, to call for military support, to activate ancient defense systems. Nothing worked. It was as if the humans had simply reached out and turned off the galaxy's ability to respond. When the time was up, Admiral Nakamura returned to the council chambers. This time, she came alone, walking through security checkpoints that should have stopped her but somehow didn't. The guards simply stepped aside, their weapons refusing to function, their communication devices dead in their hands. The council members were already waiting, arranged in their traditional circle of power. But today, that circle felt more like a trap. Have you reached a decision? Nakamura asked, standing in the center of the chamber where so many species had been condemned to exile and death. Vexthul straightened his robes and tried to project the authority his position had once carried. Admiral, the Council has reviewed your accusations. While we sympathize with the hardships your people faced during exile, we cannot accept responsibility for— Stop. The single word cut through his speech like a blade. Nakamura's enhanced eyes seemed to glow in the chamber's lighting. I didn't ask for excuses. I asked for a decision. General Korth's mandibles clicked angrily. You cannot simply walk into our chambers and make demands. The Council has ruled this galaxy for over 3,000 years. We will not be threatened by a single ship of exiles. Nakamura laughed, and the sound echoed strangely in the vast chamber. A single ship? General? You really don't understand what's happening here, do you? She activated her personal display device, and the air filled with holographic images. Star charts appeared, showing the entire galaxy, but marked with symbols and information the Council had never seen before. This is the galaxy as you know. It, she said, highlighting the core worlds and established trade routes. Safe, peaceful, predictable. But this is the galaxy as it really is. The hologram changed, showing hidden fleets, secret bases, and supply lines that crisscrossed through supposedly empty space. Hundreds of ships were revealed, positioned at strategic points throughout Council territory. While you slept in your comfortable chambers, we've been building, learning, preparing. The Retribution isn't alone, Council. It's the flagship of a fleet that's been studying your weaknesses for 2 centuries. Science Advisor Zemtar leaned forward, his multiple eyes focusing on the display. This is impossible. Our sensors would have detected. Your sensors detect what we allow them to detect, Nakamura interrupted. The Kethari taught us about biological camouflage. The Zarthul showed us how to bend energy around our ships. The Velnox gave us artificial intelligence that makes your computers look like stone tools. She gestured, and the hologram zoomed in on various council worlds. Each one showed human agents moving through cities, spaceports, and government buildings like ghosts. We've been watching you, Council. We know about your secret police, your hidden prisons, your plans for dealing with difficult species. We know about the Althari genocide you covered up. We know about the Thekron biological weapons program. We know everything. The chamber fell silent as council members realized the full scope of what they were facing. This wasn't just a military threat. The humans had systematically penetrated every aspect of their society. "What do you want from us?" whispered Cultural Minister Yelandra, her flower-like face pale with fear. "What we want is simple," Nakamura replied. "We want you to face the consequences of your actions. Every species you've murdered deserves justice. Every truth you've hidden deserves to see light." "And if we refuse?" Vexathul asked, though his voice carried no real defiance anymore. The hologram changed again, showing the Council's military forces. Mighty fleets that had kept peace through fear for millennia. But now those fleets were marked with targeting indicators, their weaknesses highlighted, their positions tracked in real time. "Then we'll show you what happens when predators finally catch their prey," Nakamura said simply. As if summoned by her words, the lights in the chamber flickered. When they steadied, the Council's communication systems came alive with reports from across their territory. Fleet commanders frantically reported that their ships' weapons systems were failing. Planetary governors called for help as their defense networks went offline. Trade station managers screamed about cargo vessels disappearing into space-time, anomalies that hadn't existed minutes before. "Stop this!" General Korth buzzed, leaping from his seat. "Order your people to stop!" "My people?" Nakamura asked innocently. "General, this is just a demonstration. If we wanted your fleets destroyed, they would already be dust. If we wanted your worlds conquered, we would already be landing troops. What you're seeing is mercy." The reports continued flooding in. A council member here, a military commander there, all beginning to receive packages containing detailed records of their crimes against exiled species. Evidence that should have been destroyed centuries ago was somehow being delivered to news networks, resistance groups, and government officials throughout council space. "How are you doing this?" Zemtar demanded. "Our security protocols are written by people who think in straight lines," one of Nakamura's officers said as she materialized from what had appeared to be an empty corner of the chamber. Her approach had been completely silent, completely invisible until she chose to reveal herself. "Humans learned to think differently in the Rim. We had to." More figures appeared from concealment around the chamber. Dozens of humans had been present the entire time, unseen and undetected by the Council's most advanced security systems. "The choice is still yours," Nakamura said as her people took positions around the terrified council members. "Surrender and face trial. Your crimes will be judged by representatives of every species you've wronged. Justice will be painful, but it will be fair." "And the alternative?" Vexthul whispered. Nakamura's expression became something that would haunt the Chancellor's nightmares for whatever remained of his life. "The alternative is that we stop playing by your rules and start playing by ours. And Council, you really don't want to know what our rules look like." She moved closer to the council platform, her enhanced body radiating a predatory confidence that made every alien in the chamber want to flee. "You see, there's something you never understood about humans. You thought our violence was random, chaotic, primitive, but human violence isn't mindless destruction. It's a tool, and we've had 200 years to perfect it." The holographic display shifted one final time, showing detailed attack plans for every council stronghold, every hidden base, every backup government facility. The plans were so thorough, so precise, that it was clear the humans had been preparing for this moment since the day they were exiled. "Your time is up," Nakamura announced. We're done asking nicely. Tomorrow the real war begins. And Council, I promise you this. By the time we're finished, the galaxy will know exactly what you are and exactly what you've done. She turned to leave, but paused at the chamber doors. Oh, and Council? Tonight, you might want to try calling your allies for help. You'll find that very educational. As the humans vanished as silently as they had appeared, the Council members frantically activated their emergency communication systems. They called their most trusted allies, their strongest military commanders, their most loyal colony worlds. No, one answered. In the silence that followed, Chancellor Vexthul finally understood the true scope of their situation. The humans hadn't just returned from exile. They had returned as executioners, and the galaxy's trial was about to begin. The war began at exactly midnight, Galactic Standard Time. Not with massive fleet battles or orbital bombardments, but with something far more terrifying: silence. Admiral Corex of the Council's Third Fleet was the first to understand what was happening. His ships had been patrolling the outer rim of Council space when his communications officer reported something impossible. "Sir, we've lost contact with command." "Technical difficulties?" Corex asked, though something cold was already forming in his stomach. "No, sir. The signals are being transmitted, but they're not reaching their destination. It's like something is eating our communications." Within hours, the same reports came from every Council fleet, every military base, every government facility. The galaxy's communication network, built over thousands of years and considered completely secure, was simply gone. Ships could talk to each other if they were close enough, but anything beyond a few light years vanished into emptiness. Chancellor Vexthul stood in the Council's emergency command center, watching his empire crumble in real time. The massive displays that once showed the ordered flow of commerce and communication throughout the galaxy now showed only darkness. Red warning lights blinked where entire sectors had gone silent. "How is this possible?" he demanded of his technical staff. "The communication network has redundancies built into redundancies. It would take decades to dismantle it." Chief Engineer Mordag, a spider-like being whose race had built much of the network, clicked his mandibles nervously. "Sir, they're not dismantling it. They're hijacking it. Someone has taken control of our own systems and is using them against us." Before Vexthul could respond, every screen in the command center flickered and changed. Instead of tactical displays and status reports, they now showed a single image: Admiral Nakamura, sitting calmly in what appeared to be the Retribution's command center. "Good morning, Council," she said, her voice coming through speakers that should have been completely isolated from outside signals. "I hope you slept well, because it's the last peaceful night you'll ever have." "This is impossible," Technical Director Yemosh screeched, his tentacles frantically working at his console. "These systems are completely isolated." Nakamura smiled. "Director, you're thinking like someone who built technology to control others. We built our technology to be free. There's a difference." The image shifted, showing views from across Council space. Trade stations burning with mysterious fires that consumed only specific sections while leaving the rest untouched. Military bases where soldiers reported their own weapons refusing to function. Planetary governors receiving deliveries of evidence, documenting their personal involvement in genocide and cover-ups. "You ruled through fear and ignorance," Nakamura continued. "You kept species apart so they couldn't compare notes about your crimes. You controlled information so no one could see the full picture of your corruption. Well, today that ends." General Korth had been frantically trying to contact his field commanders. "Admiral, we can negotiate. Surely there's a way to resolve this without what, General? Without consequences? Without justice?" Nakamura's image leaned forward, her enhanced eyes seeming to look directly at him through the screen. "General, do you remember the Yethkari?" Korth's insect face went pale. The Yethkari had been a peaceful species of traders, exiled 3 decades ago for unfair business practices. In reality, they had discovered that the Council was artificially inflating food prices to keep outer worlds dependent. They had children, General. Families. They trusted you when you told them the Rim territories had habitable worlds waiting for them. Do you remember what you did when they sent distress signals? The screen split, showing archive footage of Korth, himself ordering the signals to be ignored, laughing as he told his subordinates that the problem would solve itself. "I remember," Nakamura said softly. "Because we found their ships, all of them, including the children's bodies." The image returned to Nakamura alone, but her expression had changed. The cold professionalism was gone, replaced by something far more dangerous. "This isn't war, Council. War implies you have a chance to fight back. This is an execution." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in terrified silence. Before anyone could speak, new reports began flooding in. Council members throughout the galaxy were simply vanishing from their homes, their offices, their private ships. Not killed, not captured in any conventional sense. Just gone, leaving behind only recordings of their confessions and detailed evidence of their crimes. "Sir," Communications Officer Telwyn called out, her voice shaking. "We're receiving reports from the Centauri Trade Hub. The human fleet has arrived." "How many ships?" Vexthul demanded. "That's just it, sir. There are no ships. But the station's defense systems have gone completely offline, and the docking bays are opening and closing by themselves. The station commander is reporting that human soldiers are moving through the corridors, but security cameras can't track them." More reports followed. The Althari Republic's capital world reported that their planetary defense grid had turned on itself, destroying key military installations while carefully avoiding civilian areas. The Zekthul Empire's battle fleet found their ship's computers displaying detailed analyses of every tactical mistake they had ever made, along with predictions of what would happen if they tried to resist. But the most terrifying reports came from Council loyalists who tried to fight back. A military commander who ordered his fleet to attack a suspected human position found his ship's weapons systems firing on each other instead. A planetary governor who declared martial law discovered that his own security forces were refusing orders, claiming their weapons had been convinced to stop working. "They're not just defeating us," science advisor Zemtar whispered, his multiple eyes staring at the incoming reports. "They're making us defeat ourselves." Admiral Korex's fleet was the first to encounter the full scope of human capabilities. His ships detected what appeared to be a single human vessel approaching their position. Standard tactics dictated a simple response: overwhelming firepower from multiple angles. "All ships, target the human vessel and fire on my command," Korex ordered. "Sir," his weapons officer reported, "the targeting systems are showing multiple contacts, but sensors show only one ship. That's impossible. Lock onto the largest signature and fire." The Council ships opened fire with enough energy to destroy a small moon. The space where the human ship had been exploded in brilliant light and flame. For a moment, Korex allowed himself to hope that the humans were not as advanced as they claimed. Then his sensor officer screamed, "Sir, the human ship is directly behind us, but it's also still in front of us, and to port, and starboard. How is it in 5 places at once?" Korex stared at his displays in horror. His sensors clearly showed one human ship, but that ship appeared to be simultaneously attacking his fleet from multiple directions. His weapons fire passed harmlessly through what should have been solid targets, while the human vessel's return fire struck his ships with impossible precision. "Retreat," he ordered. "All ships, retreat immediately." "Sir," his navigator called out, "our navigation computers are showing that we're already retreating, but we're also advancing and holding position. The computers can't decide which reality is correct." That's when Korex understood. The humans weren't just using advanced technology. They were using technology that made reality itself uncertain. His ships were being defeated not by superior firepower, but by weapons that attacked the very concept of existence. The last transmission from his fleet was simple. Tell the Council that humanity didn't just survive in the Rim. They learned to rewrite the rules of the universe. Back in the Council command center, Vexthul watched his empire dissolve in real time. Entire sectors going dark, fleets reporting impossible defeats, and worst of all, the growing realization that the humans had been planning this for far longer than anyone had imagined. "Sir," one of his aides whispered, "what are your orders?" Vexthul stared at the displays showing the systematic destruction of everything he had spent his life building. "Orders? What orders can I give against an enemy that can be in 5 places at once? Against technology that convinces our own weapons to betray us? Against people who can walk through our most secure facilities like they own them?" He turned to face his staff, and they saw something in his expression that they had never seen before. The look of prey that had finally realized it was being hunted. "Send a message to all remaining Council forces," he said quietly. "Tell them to surrender. Maybe the humans will be merciful." But even as he spoke the words, Vexthul knew that mercy was not what humanity had returned to offer. The message Chancellor Vexthul had tried to send was never transmitted. As his communications officer reached for the controls, every screen in the command center flickered and went dark. When the lights returned, they were no longer alone. Standing in the center of the command center was a figure that made several council members cry out in terror. It was humanoid, but its skin seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. Where its face should have been was a constantly changing display of star fields and mathematical equations. "I am consciousness node prime of the Velnox Collective," it said in a voice that sounded like music and mathematics combined. "The Council declared us extinct 47 years ago. We remember." Before anyone could respond, the air shimmered and another figure appeared. This one was clearly alien, but somehow beautiful, with features that seemed to shift between different forms as if unable to decide what shape to take. "I am Hive Singer Yelthara of the Cathari," it announced. "You exiled us to die because we refused to create biological weapons for your wars. We survived." More figures materialized throughout the command center. Energy beings that glowed with inner light, insectoid creatures with crystalline shells, flowing masses of living gas that somehow maintained coherent thought, species after species that the Council had declared extinct, troublesome, or simply inconvenient. "This is impossible," Science Advisor Zemtar whispered. "Our records show that these species are all dead." "Your records show what you wanted to believe," said a new voice. Admiral Nakamura stepped out of what had appeared to be empty air, her enhanced form now clearly visible among the gathered representatives of supposedly extinct civilizations. "But death isn't as final as you thought, and extinction isn't as permanent as you hoped," she gestured to the beings around her. "The Velnox learned to transfer their consciousness into quantum matrices when their bodies died. The Cathari developed biological immortality when faced with your biological weapons. The Zarthul evolved beyond physical form entirely. Every species you tried to murder found a way to survive." "And they all found us," added another human voice. Captain Sarah Chen materialized next to Nakamura, her uniform bearing symbols from dozens of different species. "Because humans have one talent that even we didn't fully understand until we reached the rim. We're very good at making friends with people you've wronged." The holographic displays around the command center came alive, showing the true scope of what the Council was facing. It wasn't just humanity that had returned. It was every species that had ever been exiled, cast out, or marked for extinction by the Council's authoritarian rule. Fleet after fleet materialized throughout Council space, but these weren't human ships. The sleek biomechanical vessels of the Cathari emerged from what had appeared to be empty space. Crystalline constructs that seemed to be made of solidified starlight announced themselves as Zarthul warships. Massive geometric forms that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously identified as Velnox battle platforms. "How many?" General Korth asked, his voice barely audible. "Consciousness." Node Prime's face display showed a number that made several Council members faint. 67 species, 437 worlds, 1.7 million ships, all united under the Rim Alliance Charter. All trained by humans, Hive Singer Yelthara added with something that might have been a smile. "Your people taught us much about survival, about adaptation, about the importance of working together against a common enemy." Nakamura activated her personal display, showing the galaxy as the Council had never seen it. What they had always viewed as empty rim space was revealed to be a thriving network of civilizations, all connected by technologies and alliances that surpassed anything in Council space. "While you slept in your comfortable core worlds, we built something new," she explained. "Not an empire based on fear and control, but an alliance based on mutual respect and shared purpose. Every species contributes what they do best. The Cathari provide biological expertise. The Velnox handle information processing. The Zarthul manage energy distribution. Humans coordinate strategy and tactics." "And what is our shared purpose?" Chancellor Vex Thul asked, though he already knew the answer. "Justice," replied every voice in the room simultaneously, creating a harmony that resonated through the command center's structure. "For every species you murdered, for every world you poisoned, for every truth you buried, for every life you destroyed." The displays shifted again, showing Council military forces throughout the galaxy. But now those forces were surrounded, outgunned, and completely outmatched by technologies they couldn't understand and tactics they couldn't predict. "Your fleets are built for intimidation," Captain Chen explained. "Large, visible, designed to make enemies surrender, rather than fight. Our fleets are built for effectiveness. Small, adaptable, designed to win wars rather than prevent them." "This isn't war," Cultural Minister Yelandra protested weakly. "This is annihilation." "No," Consciousness Node Prime corrected. "It's display, face, showing images of thriving worlds and happy populations." "Annihilation is what you did to us. This is reconstruction." the alien being gestured, and the displays showed something that made the council members gasp in shock. Throughout their territory, worlds that had been reporting attacks and chaos were now showing signs of rapid recovery. Damaged infrastructure was being repaired by technologies far beyond council science. Starving populations were receiving food. Shipments from sources that shouldn't exist. Oppressed minorities were being liberated by forces that moved too quickly to track. You see, Hive singer Yelthara explained, we didn't come back just to destroy the council. We came back to replace it with something better. Admiral Nakamura moved closer to the council platform, her enhanced senses clearly detecting the fear radiating from every council member. For 2 centuries, you've ruled through division. You kept species apart, made them compete for resources, convinced them that cooperation was impossible. But the Rim taught us something different. She gestured to her alien allies. It taught us that diversity is strength, that different perspectives solve different problems, that when species work together instead of against each other, they can accomplish things that seem impossible. What happens to us? Vexthul asked quietly. The room fell silent as every eye turned to the human admiral. For a moment, Nakamura's expression softened, showing something that might have been sympathy. That depends on you, she said finally. Those council members who were directly involved in genocide will face trial. The evidence is overwhelming and the sentences will be severe. Those who were simply following orders or genuinely didn't know about the worst crimes. Well, they'll have a chance to help build something better. And if we refuse, General Korth demanded. Captain Chen answered that question by simply existing. Her presence in the secure command center, along with dozens of beings from supposedly extinct species, made it clear that refusing was not really an option. General, Nakamura said gently, the time for refusing is over. Your empire is gone. Your fleets are defeated. Your secrets are exposed. The only question now is whether you want to be part of the solution or part of the cleanup. The displays around them showed the reality of their situation. Council space was already being transformed. New governments were forming based on representation rather than domination. Technologies were being shared freely rather than hoarded. Species that had been enemies for millennia were discovering they could work together when they weren't being manipulated by council policies. This is how it ends, Consciousness Node Prime announced, its voice carrying mathematical certainty. Not with the destruction of civilization, but with its evolution. The Council maintained order through fear and ignorance. The Rim Alliance will maintain peace through cooperation and understanding. Your choice is simple, Admiral Nakamura concluded. Help us build a better galaxy, or spend whatever time you have left watching us build it without you. As if to emphasize the point, the command center's walls became transparent, showing the space around the council station. The Retribution was no longer alone. Hundreds of ships from dozens of species surrounded the station, their weapons powered. Down, but their presence unmistakable. The age of the Galactic Council was over. The age of the Rim Alliance had begun. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, other species that had thought themselves alone were receiving messages of hope, telling them that they were not forgotten, that help was coming, and that the long night of council rule was finally ending. 3 weeks after the fall of the council, the trials began. Not in the Grand Council chambers where so many species had been condemned, but in a simple courtroom aboard the Retribution, with judges from every species that had suffered under council rule. Chancellor Vexthul sat in the defendant's chair, his scaled hands trembling as evidence of his crimes was presented with mechanical precision. Documents, recordings, testimonies from survivors who had been thought dead for decades. The prosecution was methodical, thorough, and utterly devastating. The defendant authorized the exile of 43 species, Prosecutor Yelthara stated, her Kethari features shifting to reflect the gravity of her words. Of these, 37 were provided with deliberately false navigation data that led them into radiation fields, black hole clusters, or space claimed by hostile entities. Admiral Nakamura sat in the observers section, watching with the patient, satisfaction of someone who had waited 2 centuries for this moment. Beside her sat representatives of every Rim Alliance member species, their diverse forms united in their attention to the proceedings. The defendant knew that these species would die. The prosecutor continued. His personal communications, recovered from archived data cores, show clear acknowledgement that exile to the Rim territories was a death sentence disguised as mercy. Vexthul's defense attorney, a human volunteer from the Alliance's legal corps, did his best to present mitigating circumstances, but there was no denying the evidence. The records were too complete, the testimonies too consistent, the pattern of systematic murder too clear. Your Honor, the defender said to Judge Consciousness Node Prime, whose face display showed the mathematical certainties of legal precedent. My client was operating within the legal framework established by counsel. Tradition. He was following procedures that had been in place for thousands of years. Following orders, Judge Yelthera replied, her features now reflecting deep sadness, is not a defense for genocide. The trial lasted 6 days. When it ended, Vexthul was sentenced to life imprisonment on a rehabilitation world, where he would spend his remaining years helping to build infrastructure for refugee populations. It was, the court noted, more mercy than he had ever shown his victims. But Vexthul's trial was only the beginning. Throughout the former council territory, similar proceedings were taking place. Military commanders who had knowingly participated in the murder of exile fleets, scientists who had developed biological weapons for use against troublesome species, bureaucrats who had falsified supply records to ensure exiled populations would starve. Some council members had tried to flee when they realized what was coming. They discovered that running from the Rim Alliance was considerably more difficult than running from the old council. Velnox quantum tracking meant there was nowhere in the galaxy to hide. Zarthul energy manipulation could disable any ship's propulsion systems. And human strategic thinking meant that every escape route had been anticipated and blocked. Admiral Nakamura stood on the observation deck of the Retribution, looking out at what had once been the Council's central command station. It was being converted into a museum and memorial, its halls filled with exhibits documenting the crimes of the old regime and the stories of those who had survived them. Any regrets? Captain Chen asked, joining her at the viewport. Nakamura considered the question carefully. About the trials? No. Justice delayed is justice denied, but justice delivered late is still justice. And about the methods we used? That was a harder question. The Rim Alliance's victory had been swift and decisive, but it hadn't been bloodless. Some council loyalists had fought to the end, forcing conflicts that could have been avoided, with surrender. Some worlds had resisted liberation, preferring familiar oppression to uncertain freedom. We did what was necessary, Nakamura said finally. And we did it as humanely as possible. Every civilian evacuation completed before we disabled military installations. Every captured soldier offered the chance to surrender. Every government official given the opportunity to cooperate. But we didn't compromise. We didn't accept half measures or negotiate away justice for the sake of peace. The galaxy needed to see that actions have consequences, that crimes against entire species cannot be hidden or forgiven or forgotten. Through the viewport, they could see ships from dozens of species working together to repair damage from the final council resistance. Kethari bioships were healing radiation damage to station hulls. Velnox quantum processors were restoring corrupted data archives. Human engineering crews were installing new life support systems designed by Zarthul energy specialists. The integration is proceeding faster than our most optimistic projections, Chen observed. Turns out species are eager to cooperate when they're not being manipulated into conflict. Of course they are, Nakamura replied. The Council's greatest lie was that diversity leads to chaos. The truth is that diversity leads to strength, but only when it's allowed to develop naturally instead of being controlled and exploited. A communication alert chimed, and Consciousness Node Prime's image appeared on the viewport display. Admiral, we have received the final surrender from the Outer Rim Defense Force. All Council military assets are now under Alliance control. Any casualties? Nakamura asked. Minimal. They chose surrender over resistance once they realized their superiors had already been captured or tried. Nakamura nodded. Begin decommissioning their weapon systems and retrofitting their ships for humanitarian use, and make sure their crews understand they're welcome to join Alliance forces if they want to help rebuild what their previous government destroyed. Understood. Also, we have received formal requests for Alliance membership from 17 new species that were previously under Council control. All have been approved by the Integration Committee. Good. Schedule orientation sessions for their representatives, and make sure they understand that membership means both benefits and responsibilities. As the communication ended, Captain Chen smiled. 17 more species. At this rate, the Alliance will be twice the size of the old Council within a year. Quality over quantity, Nakamura reminded her. We're not trying to build an empire. We're trying to build a community. The difference was crucial. The old Council had ruled through fear, keeping member species weak and divided so they could never challenge Council authority. The Rim Alliance operated on voluntary cooperation, with each species contributing their unique strengths to common goals. Admiral, another voice called. They turned to see Hive Singer Yelthara approaching, her Kethari features bright with excitement. The first graduation ceremony is ready. Nakamura and Chen followed her to the station's main assembly hall, where a remarkable sight awaited them. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species were gathered together, all wearing the same simple uniform marked with the Rim Alliance symbol. They were the first class of graduates from the new Integration Academy, where former enemies learned to work together as equals. Among them were former Council soldiers learning humanitarian aid techniques from species they had once been trained to fight. Scientists from different worlds collaborating on projects that no single species could complete alone. Diplomats studying communication methods that bridged the gap between radically different forms of consciousness. Today, Nakamura addressed the assembled graduates, you become something new. Not representatives of your individual species, but ambassadors for cooperation itself. You will carry the message that diversity is not something to be feared or controlled, but something to be celebrated and nurtured. She looked out at the mixed crowd of humans, Cathari, Velnox, Zarthul, and dozens of other species, all united by common purpose rather than divided by artificial conflicts. The old Council told you that peace required submission, that order required conformity, that safety required the surrender of freedom. They were wrong. Real peace comes from understanding. Real order comes from cooperation. Real safety comes from standing together against those who would divide us. The graduation ceremony was simple but profound. Each graduate received their commission not from a single authority figure, but from representatives of multiple species working in harmony. It was a symbol of the Alliance's core principle. No single perspective could contain all wisdom, but together, different viewpoints could illuminate truth. After the ceremony, Nakamura returned to her quarters aboard the Retribution. The walls were lined with mementos from their long journey, artifacts from exiled species, star charts of the Rim territories, and most prominently, a list of names. Every human who had died during the exile years, everyone who hadn't lived to see this day. We did it, she said quietly to the empty room. We brought them justice. We made sure they weren't forgotten. But even as she spoke the words, Nakamura knew the work was far from over. The trials would continue for months as more evidence emerged and more criminals were identified. The integration process would take years as former enemies learned to trust each other. And somewhere in the vast galaxy, there were undoubtedly other oppressed species who still needed help. The Rim Alliance had won its first victory, but victories were just the beginning. Real change would come through patience, persistence, and the daily work of building something better than what came before. Outside her window, ships from across